we lawyers can be extremely proud of the fact that Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer. He wasn't a cause lawyer. He wasn't a guy that used his law practice just to advance his political career. He was a working stiff that handled thousands of cases in our courts all over, mostly central Illinois. So he's really he's very much a fabric of this community, and many of his contemporaries are still alive, some here, descendants of them, and are still alive. So he still has a presence here as a lawyer. So for this organization to give an award for outstanding lawyer is particularly significant and appropriate. This year, Tim Bertschy of Peoria is our honoree. And I want to tell you a little something about Tim. He was educated at the University of Illinois, which means he's an extremely intelligent fellow. And his law degree came from George Washington University. He returned to his hometown of Peoria, where he practiced law for over 40 years. He was in the firm of Heil, Royster, Velker, and Allen. And just a personal word about that. That firm is probably the best, most prestigious insurance defense firm in downstate. When I started practicing, long before this young man, Tim Bertschy, we were also an insurance defense firm in Bloomington. So they were our competition. So we knew what we were up against. It's a wonderful firm, and I can actually remember when Tim joined that firm, and we got to know each other some, not closely, but so I have a personal testimonial to what a fine lawyer he was. I didn't know the other aspects of his life. He has contributed much to our system of justice with significant effort for the benefit of fellow attorneys in the courts, especially with programs to provide legal assistance to those who cannot afford a lawyer. He's had a guiding light in his role for lawyers in terms of developing the rules of practice for the Bar Association. There are many, many contributions he's made to his community outside the law, too numerous to mention. When we measure Lincoln, a lawyer against Lincoln, Lincoln left us a good guidepost or series of guideposts. In the collected works, you'll find a fragment called Lecture, Notes for a Law Lecture. And nobody knows exactly what that was for, but it was Lincoln's definition of how you measure a lawyer. And it was published, we think it was written sometime around the 1851 or so. But here's how he defined a good lawyer, and now we can put Tim up against this. Diligence. That makes me a little tight under the collar right there. Leave nothing to do tomorrow which can be done today, said Lincoln. Tim has commented on his opinions of the essential elements, and this is one he's said that is critical. Lawyers, like many people, put off, and I recall this, looking for things till it gets better and better and better, and before you know it, you're running late, so you have to throw something together, and it's not as good as it should be. So diligence is imperative. Extraneous speaking. Lincoln put this out there, and saying this should be practiced and cultivated. It is the avenue for lawyers to get to the public. Tim has made those same observations about oral persuasion. It's an art that some lawyers enjoy, and some lawyers don't, but it's a very essential art. Unfortunately, Tim has observed, as we make more and more presentations and arguments in print, why we don't get, that's not the element it once was, but it's still extremely important. Discourage litigation, that's a bad idea. Persuade your neighbor, this is Lincoln, persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can. Point out how the nominal winner is often a real loser in fees, expenses, and waste of time. Tim suggests that a lawyer needs to remember that a lawyer's best day in court is usually one of the worst days in his client's life. Really good lawyers should be sure to restore the client to the best situation with the least discomfort for that client. And settlement is a good way to do it. The system demands it, and it's a way that lawyers should behave. Fees is another matter that Lincoln commented on. The matter of fees is important, far beyond the question of bread and butter involved. Properly attended to, fuller justice is done to both the lawyer and client. And the important thing there is we all worry about overcharging. We hear about lawyers gouging clients, but the lawyer has to set his fees to be fair to himself as well. And Lincoln pointed that out to us. Tim notes that times have changed a bit since Lincoln's practice. Yeah, you're right there, Tim. Lincoln had little overhead, and the modern lawyer, to be competent and successful, has significant overhead. However, taking that into account, Tim tells us be fair to the client and fair to yourself. And the final one won't surprise. Honesty in all events, be honest as a lawyer. Lincoln said in this piece, if you can't be honest, then don't be a lawyer. Tim notes that as a lawyer, your reputation for honesty follows you everywhere. When we see a lawyer like Tim Bertschy, who is recognized by his peers, applauded by the public, giving himself to the client's best interest, but also giving himself to the system of justice, we at the Abraham Lincoln Association can indeed provide modern recognition to his work in the noble calling of the practice of law. Tim Bertschy of Peoria is this year's winner of the Lincoln the Lawyer Award.
Thank you very much, Guy, for those kind comments. I recall those days, too, when I was a young lawyer and you were a much younger lawyer, and we had quite a bit of fun together in court. And frankly, to receive this award from you is a special thing for me. Thank you very much. My thanks, too, to the Abraham Lincoln Association and its Board of Directors for this wonderful award. I am indeed honored to receive it. Anytime a lawyer's name is mentioned in the same breath as Abraham Lincoln's name, it's a humbling experience. The receipt of this award from the preeminent Lincoln organization, which recognizes a lawyer whose career is deemed to reflect the character and ideals of Abraham Lincoln, is one of the highlights of my career and my life. It is particularly humbling, too, when I recognize the names of those who are past recipients of this award, many of whom I've known. Those include Governor Jim Thompson, Justice Robert Underwood, Judges Harlington Wood, Abraham Lincoln Marovitz, and Richard Mills, Attorneys Tom Johnson, and Joe Hartzler, and Elmer Gertz, and Floyd Abrams, and in particular my dear friend and mentor, Dick Thies. It is not lost on me that this is rarefied air. I can only hope that my career has reflected to other lawyers in some way the larger inspiration which these past award winners and attorneys have engendered in me, for indeed each of them has been an example to me in my career and my life. Now, I have a lot of friends here tonight, and I don't have time to introduce all of them. But 4 people are here, former colleagues of mine, as a complete surprise to me. And I do feel compelled to say something about them, because I wouldn't be standing here before you tonight if it wasn't for the incredible law firm for which I worked for 41 years. It was a wonderful group of people, from the top to the very bottom, lawyers, staff, everyone in the firm, who gave me the opportunities to grow as a lawyer, who showed me how to be a lawyer, and encouraged me to be an outstanding lawyer. The 4 people here tonight are Craig Young, managing partner of our firm, Gary Bora, Teresa Powell, and the last person I'm a little bit hesitant to acknowledge because I'll get nothing but grief from him at every family holiday, and that's my brother Nick, who is here with us this evening. It indeed is a true pleasure to get to practice law with your brother. Now, it would be foolish for me before this august group of Lincoln scholars to believe that I could provide to you this evening Lincoln insights which you've not already discovered or discussed, or that I could psychoanalyze Lincoln's life and the relationships in that life, or that I could tell you things about Lincoln's career that you already don't know. I can't tell you why it was a man who was born 211 years ago today, in the most humble of circumstances, became, among all the children born on that date across the world, and even in that year, why he became one of the most significant people in world history. But allow me, if you would, a few minutes to talk about Lincoln from a very personal perspective. I wanted to be a lawyer since age 8. I also loved the study of history, particularly American history, and I grew up in central Illinois. So put all of that together. Lawyer, loves history, central Illinois. Well, they understandably lead quickly and unerringly to a fascination and reverence for Abraham Lincoln. My parents recognized and fed this interest. When I was a child, we visited the Lincoln shrines here in Springfield and in New Salem, and in the Lincoln sites in Washington, D.C., at Gettysburg and Manassas, and a host of other Lincoln locations. I was encouraged by them to read, and I did read much about Lincoln and his times. I went to law school in Washington, D.C. at George Washington University. My first year I lived downtown, and each afternoon I went for a run on the mall. I would run down through Foggy Bottom, and my first stop was the Lincoln Memorial. I would run up the many stairs, emphasis on many stairs, and catch my breath while communing with Lincoln while he sat impressively in the Daniel French statue. Over time, I made it a point to memorize from each wall and each side of Lincoln the Gettysburg Address and the second inaugural address. But the memorial was more than just a stopping point on my run. It was a site of peaceful reflection at a difficult time in my life. Upon graduation, Janet and I took up life in central Illinois. Now, the fear of a speaker is you always screw up big time, and I just have, because I meant to introduce after my firm the most important aspect of my life, my wife Janet. So there she is. Sorry, sweetie. So upon graduation, Janet and I returned home here to central Illinois. And it wasn't lost on me that I was now practicing law in the same communities as Abraham Lincoln had. And that I drove the same roads, now paved, that he took a horse upon. And while I didn't represent the same people as Lincoln represented, in some cases I actually represented their direct descendants. And it was particularly thrilling to try cases or to argue motions in the Putnam County Courthouse, because that courthouse is a courtroom in which Lincoln himself appeared for trial. And like all lawyers, but I think especially Illinois lawyers, throughout my career, I looked upon Abraham Lincoln as the gold standard to which all lawyers should aspire. And of course for Illinois lawyers, but I think lawyers everywhere, we have a spiritual affinity with Abraham Lincoln. Yes, he lived in a different age, but to me, Lincoln's voice has always been one that speaks to all ages, to the universal truths that are unbounded by time. Lincoln's guiding principles to being a good lawyer are straightforward and few. They are found in his writings about him, and his example. They are based upon a profound understanding of human beings and are as valid today as they were 150 years ago. Guy already addressed some of these. Lincoln said, "Read the law avidly, especially as a law student and young lawyer." And certainly Lincoln gave us that example in his own life. Work hard. Understand the facts and the science of your case. There are many stories of how Lincoln went out and studied the contraptions, in his words, of the time, so he understood exactly how these things worked so he could address them in court. Be respectful and civil. And one thing I love about Lincoln is he was respectful to people not because of the exigencies of trying a lawsuit, but because he believed in the dignity of everybody he dealt with. He was respectful to them because of their human dignity. Be diligent and prepared in all things. Cultivate speaking, especially extemporaneous speaking. But don't rely upon speaking alone as an exemption from the hard work of the law. Discourage litigation and be a peacemaker. Do not stir up litigation. Lincoln actually saw this as a moral issue. The matter of fees, Lincoln said, was more important than simply bread and butter. Set your fee structure so that you retain an interest in diligently representing your client. And honesty? Well, honesty, according to Lincoln, trumped all. Don't be a lawyer if you can't be honest. Now, Lincoln himself, always a humble person, admitted that he failed to always attain these goals. And certainly, I have not always done so. And I doubt any lawyer has done so without fail. But as a concise description of what it takes to be a good lawyer, day in and day out, Lincoln's words and his life are unsurpassed. Lawyers who aspire to this example, as I've tried to do, as Guy has tried to do, as many of you in this room who are lawyers have tried to do, we understand if you do that, you will do well in our profession. And even those of you who are not lawyers in this room understand that those are the principles of success for a lawyer, and really for anyone in any profession. But Lincoln has also always spoken to me in another and larger sense, not only as a lawyer, but as a citizen. Here his example and his words also bridge time. And it is with this that I will conclude. We live in a world today beset with anger. It has been much commented upon, and it is something with which each one in this room is familiar. Some of our fellow citizens have the conceit that this is something new, that this sense of anger and vitriol is novel to our time in history. Those here know that that is not true. This illness has affected our nation on many occasions, as early as Adams and Jefferson, and continuing to this present day. And this was true certainly in the time of Lincoln. The anger then was intense, it was generational, it was regional, it was partisan, and it was very, very personal. Lincoln himself was demeaned as a buffoon, a rube, an ape, a gorilla, and worse. But what was Lincoln's response to this? Was it to answer in kind? Was it to broadcast vicious and repeated counterattacks against his opponents? Was it to verbally scourge his adversaries as individuals? Well, those here know the answer. Lincoln's response instead was an appeal to the best in us, not the worst in us. He called upon us to reject malice and embrace charity. He spoke to the dangers of a house divided rather than seeking to capitalize on a house divided. And in soaring prose, he sought the mystic chords of memory of his fellow citizens to recall their shared history and their bonds of affection. There's a lesson here for all of us. While you might conclude that I am addressing certain current politicians, I am not. Lincoln's remarks were never directed to an individual. They were always directed to the responsibility of all of us together to rise above the galvanizing forces of anger and distrust and to be guided instead by the better angels of our nature. Lincoln's message was and is timeless. It is as old as the Bible, and it is as current as this evening. It lies at the true heart of our being. It calls us now. It is the reason that Lincoln towers above all his contemporaries and is revered to this day and will be revered through the ages. Thank you again for this wonderful honor.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.